This is the three most iconic watches of all time, what I call the Holy Trinity. And of course, I admit that this list is completely subjective and 1000% my opinion. So, before I've even had the opportunity to poison your picks, just pause the video and tell me in the comments. If you had to narrow it down to only three, what would be your pick for the most iconic watches of all time? Here is some of the criteria that I used to make my picks. All three needed to have massive brand legacy and come with a strong and current community, or what I will call desire of ownership. Each watch needs to have a design that has remained relevant and appealing for decades with minimum changes, meaning that there has been consistent demand without losing the design's core identity. And above all else, the model must have had massive influence in the world of watches. Coming in at number 3 on my list, launched in 1952, the Breitling Navitimer is one of the most iconic watches in horological history. The design is immediately recognizable and has remained largely unchanged since its inception. Designed as a true tool watch for pilots, the Navitimer features a circular slide rule rotating bezel that can be used to perform essential flight calculations such as fuel consumption and airspeed. Breitling borrowed the slide rule bezel from the 1940s chronomat, and while the title of the world's first chronograph wristwatch goes to Longines, it was Breitling in 1934 that patented the first independent second pusher that would become the chronograph that we know today. The Navitimer's influence can be seen in watch brands such as Citizen, Seiko, and Casio, just to name a few, and even shares part of its heritage with Zen by way of the Zen 903, which Breitling sold the right to produce after nearly going bankrupt during the quartz crisis. But unlike a lot of brands of that time, Breitling survived, and it was largely due to the Navitimer. Love it or hate it, I think it is hard to argue that the Navitimer deserves a spot in the top 3. Moving on to the number 2 spot on my list is a watch that I absolutely love and I wear almost daily. Launched in 1957 as part of Omega's professional line, the Speedmaster was the first chronograph to feature a tachymeter scale on the bezel instead of the dial. After passing a series of tests in 1964, the Speedmaster was declared flight qualified by NASA for all manned space missions, and in 1969 became the first watch worn on the moon when worn by Buzz Aldrin during the Apollo 11 mission.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
1 year later, and now nicknamed the Moonwatch, the Speedmaster would save lives as an oxygen tank exploded on Apollo 13.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
The crew was forced to evacuate to the smaller lunar excursion module, and to save power, turned off almost all systems, including the digital mission timer. Using the Speedmaster's chronograph, the Moonwatch became the critical tool needed to help the astronauts time the precise engine burn needed to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere.
We're going to burn at 10% thrust for 39 seconds. Jack, you time us? Got it.
Give us a count of the last 10 seconds up to 39. Let's not miss this.
The Speedmaster's design has remained largely unchanged for decades and has transcended being just another watch to become a coveted collector's item with a cultural significance that continues to grow, and in my opinion, hands down deserves the number 2 spot of the most iconic watches of all time. And the one that you have all been waiting for, number 1, and in my opinion, the single most iconic watch of all time. And by the way, if you are liking the content, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you do, please be sure to let me know what number subscriber you are in the comments. And before I mention the number 1 spot, I do want to say I fully understand that there are a lot of icons that have had a lot of influence, like the Royal Oak, for example, or watches that were first, like the first pilot's watch by Cartier. But I would also say that if we're talking about all of the factors that make up something iconic, if we took all of those factors, we threw them in a bucket, we stirred them up and poured them out. If there could be only one. Taking the top spot on my list, few watches can claim to have the legacy, the allure, or the presence as the Rolex Submariner. Introduced as a true purpose-built dive watch featuring 100 meters of water resistance, which, believe me, was unheard of at that time. The Submariner was the first dive watch to use the rotating bezel for timing dives. And when paired with luminescent markers for underwater readability, the Submariner revolutionized what dive watches should be, securing its place in history not just as a watch, but a cultural phenomenon. The Submariner has made waves far beyond the dive community. One glance and you know it's a Submariner. Its clean lines, black dial, and iconic bezel haven't strayed far from the original reference 6204. Though subtle updates like crown guards, the introduction of a ceramic bezel, and improved bracelets make the modern references, well, modern, without losing the soul of this legend. Whether you're diving in the ocean or dining in a suit, the Submariner never feels out of place. Each of these three watches represent a milestone in watchmaking and continues to inspire admiration across generations. They have been to the deepest oceans, the highest skies, and even the moon. Their enduring popularity across decades demonstrates their universal appeal to collectors and casual enthusiasts alike. Instantly recognizable, endlessly imitated, and in some cases blatantly ripped off. There is simply no way to truly measure the impact these three models have had, and it is for this reason the Breitling Navitimer, the Omega Speedmaster, and the Rolex Submariner are the three most iconic watches of all time. So as always, thank you for hanging out with me. Hit that like button. Please consider subscribing. Watch one of these videos right here. I'm James. This is Blue Collar Luxe. I will see you in the next one.